All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:31 p.m. on this 11th of May, 2017. May? Every month they say it, but I don't know.
I spent 2 weeks in Hawaii, so this is surprising. I came home and I'm like, oh yeah, it's May already. When did that happen? All right. First item, roll call. Mr. Root.
Here.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Lindenmood. Mr. Young.
Right here.
Mr. Manu.
Here.
Mr. Rose here. Ms. Howe. Here. Ms. Becker. Here. We do have quorum. So we can vote on things. Greg, would you mind taking a ball announcement?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public, and the public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or consultant, and then the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Howe, second by Mr. Lindenmood.
I want to make some suggested modifications to the agenda.
I have a suggested modification. If we could move our first informational item up to be heard before all the business items. They were here at the last meeting and enjoyed sitting through several hours worth of testimony, and we ran out of time to let them give their presentation. So if we could let them go first, that'd be really nice. That's my only suggestion. Unless someone else has a one. I recommend approval.
Second.
Any opposed to modifying that change? I guess, do we go back to the original motion? Okay, so approve the agenda with modification. Are there any opposed to approving the agenda with the modification? Hearing none, then item 6A will actually become the first item after our minutes. All right, we do have our meeting minutes from last month's meeting. We're pretty significant.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lindenmood, second by Ms. Howe. Are there any comments? Any opposed to approving the minutes? Hearing none, those meeting minutes are approved. Thank you for keeping us up to date. I know that was pretty lengthy. All right, next up is the Stewart Highway. Are you going to need the?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I need your help, Mark. I am.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon. Sean Baskin, the project manager for the Department of Transportation on the Seward Highway 75 to 90 project. With me, I've also got a number of other people on the project team. Randy Vanderwood is the project engineer on the project for the Department of Transportation. Chris Croft is HDR's designer on the project, and then Julie, who's our public involvement specialist, HDR as well. So as far as the project goes, yep, on. Okay. So the project is basically gets you from Girdwood all the way to the base of the pass, so Seward Highway 75, base of the pass, Girdwood around milepost 90. Significant features along that stretch of the roadway would be Portage Glacier Road and that curve, that intersection down there in this area. 20-mile river boat launch, which is right in here. And then Alaska Railroad Portage Station, obviously, in that area as well. And then the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, which is right here on this nice little island of an oasis between the road and the inlet there. And then, of course, Girdwood at the top end. So obviously the Seward Highway is the only connection between the rest of Alaska and the Kenai Peninsula, so it has a significant role. The boundary with the municipality of Anchorage is somewhere right in here, so that's where you kick over into the Kenai Peninsula borough. So it largely lies within the municipality of Anchorage, leaving us with why we are talking to you. The project corridor has a number of concerns, so let's just make sure we're all on the same page. It was the first designated safety corridor in 2006, and I think 2007 it was extended from about 90, from milepost 90 to milepost 87, so 3 miles into this corridor to pick up one of the curves that we did an HSIP project on around milepost 88. So there's significant concerns along the Seward Highway. 332 crashes within that 10-year segment. 6 crashes resulted in fatalities and 18 major injury crashes. Whenever we talk about crashes, I always like to talk about my story, because every one of those crashes had a story. So my wife was in a what we would call a minor injury crash, and she injured her back and she wasn't able to pick up our child. You know, a lot of these stories are way more significant than you know, that story right there. And obviously there's a safety concern out there, and something we need to address, which is one of the main reasons that we are out there to do something. There's no passing lanes along that corridor, which in that stretch, leading to driver frustration and other things. And obviously right now we have an example of the hooligan fishery issue going on, where there's everybody parking along the highway, creating safety concerns. We've, you know, the Department of Transportation, along with state troopers, go in and post lower speed limits during this time of year to try to help address some of those safety concerns, but there's an obvious need out there. And then, of course, one of the other items that we've got an issue with is there's 9 bridges in this segment. 8 of those bridges were built in the 66, 67 time period, right after the big earthquake. 7 of those bridges are structurally deficient, which means on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being new, you know, brand new, and 1, you know, basically falling down but not falling down. They're at a rating of 4. At 3, you probably load limit restrict a bridge. 2, you'd probably shut it down. And so they're right there on the verge of, you know, a significant corridor providing significant, you know, connectivity to a lot of the Kenai Peninsula and all the other benefits that the Seward Highway has. And we're right there on the verge of you know, having to do limitations. There's no guarantees of when those limitations would occur. It could occur at any time, but you know, it's right there on the verge, right? So, which brings us to our purpose and need of the project. We need to address safety. We obviously need to address roadway deficiencies in geometric and bridge structural issues, and then obviously congestion at times of the year. Which brings us to what our scope of the project is. 15 miles of repaving, so 75 to 90, the entire stretch of it will be repaved. We'll be widening out the roadway for passing lanes, so we've got 5 miles of passing lanes. We're redoing 8 of the bridges, reconstructing completely 8 of the bridges, and then rehabilitating one of them. The one that was built in '85 still has some design life left in it. That'd be Ingram Creek, which is at the milepost 75 right there at the base of the pass. We're realigning some things, and the U.S. Forest Service has a pathway that's going to be constructed as part of a separate project. We've got some elements that will be included in this project. You know, some of the more significant things is a realignment of the portage curve. So, you know, obviously this is a restriction in design speeds and travel speeds in the area. And we've addressed it with HSIP projects, highway safety improvement projects, to, you know, add in turn pockets and other things. But, you know, this project will address a lot of the major concerns. So we'll sweep through the curve with a much better alignment to allow you to travel at highway speeds through that area. We will maintain turn pockets into portage and out of it. And then obviously, we are also addressing the Wildlife Conservation Center parking lot. They already have the realignment. You may have seen them roughing it in, but it's not an active realignment, so they moved their driveway over here a little bit. So with that, we're also going to be adding in turn pockets into it to allow people to get out of the through travel way in that area. We're also adding 2 parking lots, one right here at milepost 81 and a half, and then I think around 83. And so those parking lots will be about 100-car parking lots intended to be for the hooligan fishers. And then we'll connect it with a footpath in between the 2 behind guardrail along that entire stretch, allowing people to park and then walk on the footpath, hopefully not on the shoulder of the highway. And that should address a lot of the concerns in the area as far as that short hooligan fishery concern. And of course, a project manager likes to put really tiny schedules on these things so that we have no commitment to any dates whatsoever. But big takeaways are phase 1 construction, we're hoping in 2018, 2019. Phase 2 construction following after that. So, this project has been over a decade in the making to get us through the environmental document. We are weeks away from signing the environmental document, much like we've been weeks away from signing it for the last number of years. But I swear to you, in the next couple weeks, we will hopefully, 100% of the time, almost all the time, sign the environmental document on that schedule. So, after that, we'll move forward and begin construction next year. So we've phased it into 2 phases, largely for a fiscal reason, which takes us to, I think, our cost at $200 to $250 million between the 2 phases. Most of that cost is in bridges. We've got 8 bridges to reconstruct. Bridges are expensive to reconstruct. A number of them are longer spans than, some of them are a couple shorter spans. With that, that's about it as far as the information. That next slide has the phasing, which is basically Girdwood to the 20-mile area, phase 1, and then we'll catch another little segment over here. That'll cover 3 bridges in this stretch, and then the rehabilitation of 1 here. And then we've got 5 bridges in this stretch, which, will eat up another big chunk of money as well.
I'm sorry, how many bridges in phase 1?
Phase 1 will be 3 reconstructions and then 1 rehabilitation. So there's the rehabilitation at Ingram Creek over here at 75. Any questions?
Portage Creek parking lot, is that gonna stay similar with the growth of winter biking? I've seen more people use that lot lately.
Excellent question. So if you go back to the Portage.
Can you please identify yourself
yeah.
for the record?
Jim Winchester, Anchor Santa Gravel. That biker. That
Yep.
tire biker.
So there's a number of different features that are going to happen in this area. So with this realignment of this curve, we will maintain the existing road in this section and then put in a cul-de-sac. And then that will allow a parking lot, of various, yeah. I think the intended use of that by the U.S. Forest Service is for, people to come in and snow machine. Obviously, it can be used for other things as well. Yeah.
By the hooligan parking lot.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Celeste Novak. I'm staff representative here in Florida. And I'm curious if the parking spaces in the hooligan area all have public facilities and restrooms. I don't know if that's your jurisdiction, but if you use it other than those alone.
So, yeah, excellent question. Currently, we are only putting in parking facilities. We are not including any other rest stop amenities.
Woefully under.
With facilities comes the maintenance cost, and at this current time, no one has stepped up to maintain it, so the Department of Transportation will be required to maintain it. And as I'm sure you're fully aware, we're strapped to even turn on the lights and, patch holes in the highways.
Okay.
Sean, is the funding in place?
Excellent question. So, for the design portion of it, we have the funding to design up to this point. We'll have another design hit here in another couple weeks once we get the environmental document signed. And then we'll request right-of-way funds as well. It's all shown in the STIP. So, except for that 2020, it wouldn't be in the current STIP, it'll be in the next STIP because it would be outside of. But yes, it's one of the highest priority projects in the state for obvious reasons with the bridge division.
Any other questions? Hey, Sean? Now we are on to our first action item, action 5A, C40 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Update, Tech Memo 1A.
For the record, my name is Vivian Underwood, the Senior Transportation Planner with AMATS. For this item, you have a memo, and you have our Tech Memo 1A, goals, objectives, and performance measures, and you have a comment response, or comments that we received prior to the 28th of April, and staff's responses to that. And we held a work session with several people who were here in the room 2 days ago. The CAC invited also Citizens Advisory Committee to go over the memo. And so you have an addendum to the memo and a revised table 4-1 that actually combines table 4-1 and 4-2. We realized that when we were making the presentation that it was a bit awkward going through it because there are so many tables in Tech Memo 1A. There's a lot of good information, and we asked, I guess I should back up and say what we asked the contractor to do. We asked them to review and confirm the relevancy and currency of the goals and objectives of the NTP, the 2035 and interim 2035, with respect to national goals and federal planning factors, and with respect to the adopted comprehensive plans for both the Anchorage Bowl and Chugiak Eagle River. And we also asked them to propose some performance measures for each new objective and to do a gap analysis in the objectives, which they did. They did a really thorough job. There are so many tables, though, that we didn't really have a bottom line table for you for the goals and objectives. So now you do. And in the addendum, it looks like this. It's this table. So this shows you, it's the recommended 2040 goals and objectives in the first column. The second column is the 2035 and interim 2035 goals and objectives for comparison. And the third goal gives you the gap analysis with changes. So I can step through this real quickly if you like, with changes. So this includes also a few staff edits. Oh, excuse me, yes.
Just for the people in the audience who may not be, can you explain how this fits in the big picture? Just real quick, this is, who's going to approve it, how does it fit into the next step?
Who's going to approve the what?
And what is this action item you're asking us to do?
Okay, we are asking the Technical Advisory Committee to review Technical Memorandum 1A and to approve the contents. We'll be sharing this information with the public also as we go through the public involvement process. And this is one of the first steps that we're doing to gear up for the update to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan through 2040. We do have a new website that is up. It's 2040mtp.com. If you're interested to go there, and you can sign up to get updates, regular updates from the website. Pretty good looking website.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so This table is much more elegant than the last go-round. So let me just step through. So you can clearly see that Goal 1, there was nothing for Goal 1 in the 2035 MTP. This is a new goal to preserve the existing system. And the reason for it is to align with the national goal of maintaining infrastructure in a state of good repair. So, and there are a couple of, there's another new goal, Goal 5 is a new goal. Goal 3A, we did make a change following the work session to decrease travel time during peak hour periods. So that was in response to a comment we received at the work session. Then I'm trying to focus on the objectives. Objective 3H is a new objective. It's to reduce congestion, and that is specifically to align with the national goal of congestion reduction. Goal 3L is a new objective, improve incident clearance time, and that's to align with the national goal of system reliability. So Goal 4B is a new objective, enhanced travel and tourism. That's to align with the planning factor for enhanced travel and tourism. Goal 4C is a new objective to promote a dynamic transportation system that supports the local and regional economy and job growth. That's to align with national goal and planning factor for freight movements and economic vitality. Goal 5 is a new goal. It's to promote environmental sustainability, and that's to align with the national goal of environmental sustainability. Another new objective, it's Objective 5C, to reduce or mitigate stormwater impacts of surface transportation. And that's to align with national goals and planning factors regarding the relationship between transportation and stormwater. One more new objective. 6E, to reduce unnecessary project delivery delays which add to project costs through efficient coordination. And the purpose of that is to align with national goals of reduced project delivery delays. Those are the major changes. Anything else has been done to minimize redundancies. You can see on page 1 for Goal 2, improve safety. You can see in the middle column of the original goals, safety appears in at least 4 or 5 of the 2035 MTP goals. So the purpose of this is to tighten them up, make them simpler, make them clearer, and make them more measurable. The FHWA wants us to move towards objectives-based, performance-driven approach in our planning. And it's hard to do that when you have goals that have the kitchen sink in them, as it is currently. So this new table 4-1 is really what we'd like to focus on, and just for the goals and objectives. Then for the performance measures, it's table 5-4. 5-1 are the proposed new performance measures. But that's a different matter. We're still on 1A now. No. Performance measures, we can just turn to that real quickly. Well, the memo actually covers it. Your addendum actually covers a lot of the questions that came up during the work session. You can just step through those if you want to. I don't know if it's too much detail.
Is this our first time seeing it? It is the addendum? Yeah,
Addendum.
If you want to step through it, just so
Okay.
we had a week to review the rest of the document, longer than that. But if
Yes.
you want to step through the addendum, just for those who were not at the work session.
So the first bullet is just a staff
The
edit.
very top one that says.
Oh.
Yeah.
The first one, table of contents, is just an administrative edit. We realize that 2 tables are missing. Table 3-1 and 3-2 they're in the document, it's just they're not in the table of contents. So we want to fix that. Then on page 8, actually, they left 2 staff comments in there that want to be taken out to please provide examples. So we want to take that out. So we would like to remove current tables 4-1 and 4-2 and replace it with the table we just went through. Proposed new table 4-1. On page 18, we want to add to the section 4.0 introductory text that references in tables 4-1 to system and network refer to all modes unless specifically defined otherwise. Table 5-4 on page 48, remove duplication of system reliability measure. That shows up twice, and I believe that was organized. So on page 48 to 50, table 5-4, change truck to commercial vehicle, the term. Page 48 to 49, table 5-4, remove the proposed new MTP performance measure for number of bridges that don't meet current seismic standards and add MTP policy for goal 2C to reduce vulnerability and increase resiliency of transportation infrastructure from natural hazards and disasters. We're supposed to address resiliency in our plans, and a lot of that has to do with natural hazards and disasters, but actually this MPO does not plan for natural hazards and disasters. It falls to the MPO, it falls to the municipality of Anchorage. We do have an emergency management plan and we have a natural hazards mitigation plan. So the MTP will probably look at that. That's not to say that there aren't things that we can do and talk about thinking about doing, but we feel that if we have a policy first, that we can set in motion that discussion and see how we want to do before jumping to having a performance measure for something that may or may not directly address this the need for this goal, this objective. Then we want to move the reference to benefit cost ratio from performance measure to address with a new MTP policy. The benefit cost ratio was inherited from the 2035 MTP, and it was never defined very well in there. And as we discussed at the work session, benefits and costs actually have more to do than just being a formula. It has more to do than just looking at the cost of building a road divided by miles and other people using it, or a trail, or that sort of thing. So when we talk about benefits and costs, we're actually talking about our values, our community values. And we want to make sure that we have a good discussion about that, and that it encompasses, as our criteria do, and as our goals and objectives do, that we look at all of our goals and objectives when we're talking about the benefit cost analysis. So we would like to change that to be a policy and have a broader discussion with the community about that. So the last item is to the new MTP policy, improve year-round mobility. We want to add for all modes and make that change throughout the document. So we're asking the Technical Advisory Committee to approve the draft MTP Technical Memorandum 1A with these changes that are contained in the comment response summary and in this addendum, and any other requested changes you'd like to make.
I make one quick comment.
Yes.
I know that I said this yesterday, just make sure that when this gets printed, or whenever, I guess, it's just missing page 50 that has the asterisk that describes what the asterisk in that final table means. And it's, yeah, it's not on here again. Sorry, I looked for it again.
You know, I apologize. I don't know why that happens.
I know, I printed an error for that last page. It's kind of funny.
I'd like to say one more thing. So we had Brian Betlian with the Federal Highway Administration come and give a presentation to the Technical Advisory Committee several years ago. Some of you were here, but probably several of you were not. And And what he was trying to say is that with this new direction that Federal Highways is going in for this objectives-based, performance-driven approach, is you want your goals and objectives to align with your performance measures, to align with your project selection criteria, both in the MTP and TIP. And then there's a feedback loop, so that you're constantly refining and tightening up everything, so that you're actually doing what you said you were going to do. And we're trying to improve that and get that better all the time. And so that was one of the reasons that we went through this exercise, was to make sure and double check that our, and the criteria that we'll look at in Tech Memo 1B, that all those relate back well to our goals and objectives. The goals and objectives that we have right now in the MTP, the 2035 MTP, came mostly from when we did the 2025 LRTP. And there was a 40-person roundtable. There was a lot of public involvement. There was a lot of vetting of those goals and objectives. And we have never changed those, except in 2035 we added one goal. And it was the first goal that appears in the MTP. But we have only really changed those to align with any changes in the comprehensive plan, the land use comprehensive plan that the planning department puts out. That's really, and the only other reason we would change the goals and objectives is to align ourselves with the federal planning goals and federal requirements, planning factors. So those are the two things that we checked for this time. We're not opening up the goals and objectives this time to broad public participation, because we did that originally the first time in 2025. What we did at that time, too, was really interesting. CH2 and Hill actually took everybody through a weighting exercise of the goals and objectives. They weighted every single goal and every single objective. And I went back and looked at that weighting, and it's actually changed quite a bit. Community values changed, that's why we don't want to go backwards. We don't weight the goals in this table, however. Every goal is equally weighted. So we didn't go through that exercise. But I do think it's interesting, and I'd like you all to notice that we do have more of an emphasis on travel choices, commuter choices, and more of an emphasis on accessibility as well as mobility. So we're trying to balance those two things, and we're more upfront about it. And I just wanted to draw that and make sure that you all realize that we really did a good job, I think, of trying to match the national goals, which want us to do that, and environmental sustainability, which is very broad. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions?
I've gone through this, which doesn't look anything like this. I think I get that. The railroad's got significant concerns over table 5. The reporting stuff.
The performance measures?
Yes. We've been trying to get an answer on what the performance measures are. The problem we've got is we go through 10 NPOs, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff in NPOs, those NPOs, some of which comes through here. And we sent a letter to, I think, Craig, back in January, December, a while ago, saying, so what do with this? And we sent several on to Don Gardino. We sent one to the redheaded guy that used to be here, James, yes.
Boyle?
James Boyle. And the problem we've got is we don't know how to measure what you're asking for, particularly at an MPO level.
You mean the railroad?
Yes.
We, as far as I understand, we're not going to measure what the railroad does. If you want to give us that information, that's great. Just like the AMATS is not going to measure what the public transportation department does. They are going to give us that
Right,
information.
we're gonna give it to you, and then you're gonna report it up, as I understand it, so we're required to provide it, but the question has been, what are we providing? And what is in here is not a number that we can, if we can even get it, give you any certainty that it's accurate.
I'm not an expert in which FTA performance measures apply to the railroad for any public transportation that you may be providing. And I would just, frankly, I have to defer to you to figure that out.
Mhm.
We have the transit performance measures in here,
Mhm.
but we're going to rely on Bart and his group to give that information to us. The thing is, actually, Teresa and Craig Lyon and Mr. Young are working right now to try to figure all this out, to figure out what it means. And there will be a system performance report to specifically address the new federal performance measures that it came out in we haven't gotten to the performance measures yet, but to address the federally required ones. So when they figure that out, and it hasn't been.
Well, you've got performance measure recommendations in here.
Yes, but they came from they came from FHWA and FTA final rules that are out. But as it applies to the railroad, we have to defer to you.
Well, what we're being told is we have to defer to you.
Oh, for him. But who told you that?
FTA.
Oh.
So I don't know what to do with this.
I don't either. I would say we defer to you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we ran a train today.
Yeah.
We're gonna run one tomorrow.
So here's what I would say. For any public transportation services that you currently provide, and I need to defer to Teresa and Craig, and this is not my bailiwick, and they're on the performance management team. Provide, and provide the data requested for the transit-related measures.
Well, and then that's where this is problematic.
And if they're required, then I really need to defer to you all. I mean, on this.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I've got my grants people running around with their hair on fire and trying to figure this out too. And so I don't know how I can vote to push this forward if you don't know and we don't know and nobody knows, but there's stuff in here that, at least on the face of it, we're going to be obligated to provide that we just
I can't, I find it incredulous that FTA cannot.
Yes, I can, actually. Mean distance between major mechanical failures by mode. Okay, so if something leaves here and it's fine, and it craps out in Talkeetna, does that mean, since it left here, is that part of here, or is that part of nowhere? Or if it leaves here and craps out in Fairbanks, does it crap out in Fairbanks under FMATS, or does it crap out in AMATS where it came from?
I have to think that the final rule has some definitions.
Well, and the discussion that happened yesterday in the work session, I don't mean to cut you off. As far as that goes, I think that was related to, I don't know that it was related to rail as in, it's for those, I mean, really it's providing transit for people, system reliability.
It says transportation, it doesn't say transit, and that's the problem, which is how we fall under 5307, it's transportation, and so we are under FTA, so yes, we're there, and it says by mode, and so we're flummoxed.
That's not something you track grading, because that is something that people mover tracks, correct?
Right.
So, I mean, did you already have to track that?
Well, we don't have the same problem that they're having, where once it leaves the AMATS area, he's
Yeah.
saying where.
What is it?
Yeah.
And, we've got, a substantial part of our route miles that come through AMATS simply because there's nothing there. And so, do those count?
I think you should just define it, tell FTA, this is how we're gonna do it, anything that comes to the boundary we're done, and this is how we're counting, and they have to come back with something else. I mean, the thing about it is that when it's gray, define what works for you and what you can do, and let them see that, and say, this is how we're going to do it. And they have to come back and tell you what your deficiency is and how you're gonna have to change it.
Yeah, either they'll accept what your proposal is or tell you how you have to modify it.
And if you don't have the, I mean, you tell them what you can do. And how you'll define it. That'd be the first step.
So basically, what the expectation is, as I'm reading this, is we're gonna take whatever these performance measures are, we're gonna interpret them in whatever way that A, makes sense, and B, that we can actually deliver data that we think is reasonably reliable. I got other problems there, my problems.
I mean, Aaron, the discussions we've been having, that is, I mean, when we're defining this, and we're saying what these performance measures are, how we're going to be measuring them, unless they have been strictly defined by FHWA as to what they're not. The safety ones are very specific
Well,
as
there's
far
one-
as number of crashes per, not specifically in here, but I mean, the safety ones are. But for some of these, if they're not strictly defined, it is kind of upon us to define it ourselves.
So a couple of things to this. First, these came directly out of the final rules, so we didn't make these up.
Right.
So these are going to be required kind of regardless of what we think of them. So second, if it's not fully defined in the federal rule, if the FHWA doesn't come out with something later that further defines it, it seems like they leave it up to the MPO and the state to work together on what to do, because it's the MPO reporting to the state. not to
That's
the
exactly
feds.
kind of where they've left it with us. For instance, total number of reportable fatalities and rate per vehicle revenue miles by mode. Okay, I had an empty passenger train on a reposition run over a trespasser last year in Moose Pass. Moose Pass mileage comes through AMATS. What is it? Is that a fatality? I hit it with a passenger train. There wasn't anybody on the train. There's just someone under it. So
Is it in the MPO boundary?
Yeah, it's not inside.
that's the problem. This is not in the MPO boundary, but because those 5307 comes through this MPO, is it?
I think in that case, we could very specifically say that if the fatality itself did not occur within the MPO, I mean,
But
that's
I'm
when
reporting it-
that's when we define it. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's when we have to just clearly say, if the mechanical failure, fatality, injury, crash, everything like that happens outside the boundaries of the MPO, even if it's the beginning or the end or even the middle part of the trip, happen to travel through the MPO, it's not being considered as part of these performance measures. I mean, really, that's how I would see it.
Yeah, it'd be hard to sit there and say that an accident that happened in between AMATS and FMATS is directly tied to AMATS.
Or FMATs.
Or, yeah, either, I mean,
But the attributable mileage, the attributable 5307 mileages,
I can't speak on that. That's, I'm just saying what the performance measures are, and if I'd have to look at these because these are FTA and I'm not as familiar with them. If it's not clearly defined in there, then it's up to the state and the MPO in their agreement that they have to come up with on how they are going to develop these performance measures and targets to determine that. So that's the kind of stuff that can come out and be like, look, we need to define this and get it into that agreement.
okay.
And the freight rulemaking, correct me if I'm wrong, that's one of the ones that has been delayed at this point.
Yeah, it's a system performance measure, CMAC freight.
Yeah, CMAC rate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in a
That's a
few
disaster
days.
in and of itself, but.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hear what I understand what you're saying, but I think a lot of that can be developed between the entities to kind of come up with what works best, because the feds don't really strictly define it.
Look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
If you define it, then that means.
But they are saying we have to provide it.
Yeah, you
Have to.
define it. You have to define it.
Yeah.
Provide the actions within the municipality.
What?
Providing the actions within the municipality, related to the municipality.
Yeah, I mean, it's within the MPO.
Probably, but I'm having enough of a difficulty reconciling this with that. Most of our comments, I think, on what is now this table, if I look at the people provide them, I think they were picking nits, so I'm not too worried about that. But I do know this whole reporting thing is a serious concern of ours, because I'm not even sure how we're gonna get some of the data, much less figure out what the data is.
It's concerning for the rest of us that are looking at the other ones, like CMAC and things like that, that are, we're worried what
Yeah.
it means.
Yeah.
A lot of this, I mean, a lot of the data that they want to see, the safety stuff is things we've been doing for years. A lot of the other data that they want to see now, I mean, when they say percentage increase by mode, you know, how do you define how much? I mean, we do counts. I'm not saying we don't do bike and pedestrian counts and do them regularly, but how do you really separate in this town recreational versus commuting bicyclists and actually define and show those increases in a reliable manner? I mean, and actually, and that's the thing, is it's not just doing it reliably. I mean, having that accurate data and establishing baselines. I mean, in the beginning, that's what we have to do, is establish a baseline so that we can go from there. Trust me, we're all worried.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm not sure what to do with this juncture.
Madam Chair, may I share one more thing? With the performance measures, there are a lot of new performance measures recommended. We have to include the ones from the federally required ones. There's no question. Exactly how we do that, it has to be in the MTP too. So how that's reported has yet to be determined. The others, I mean, even though you approve the document, it doesn't mean that we're absolutely going to start using them today. It means that when we update the congestion management process and the status of the system performance measures, that we'll take a look at those again, make sure that we have all the data and that it's meaningful to use these measures. We may want to change them. Just like the 2035 MTP made recommendations for performance measures. We looked at them, we did the CMP update. We used some of them, but we didn't use all of them. So it doesn't mean that there's no turning back. You approve these performance measures that are recommended in the MTP today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments being made?
Just what you had brought up at the work session is that mean distance between major mechanical failures is in here twice.
Yeah, that's one of the implications of the
Enter
system
twice and take
reliability.
the other.
They have that.
It's on the addendum at page.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, if you didn't catch that, thank you.
Page 48, so change on page 48.
I see, on this
Yeah,
memo.
I brought that up.
One question I have, so who here do we work out whatever sort of metrics that we come up with? Craig?
Well, there is a team right now of Craig and Aaron and Teresa who are working on that, so.
Okay. Well, I think, yeah, assuming this passes despite me voting against it, probably need to follow up and I'll get my focus down to you guys. We can throw mud at the wall.
I know Abul has sent a similar email requesting something like that and to work with the railroad and state, especially the asset management, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, the asset management.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'm going to open it for public comment. Is there anybody that has any questions or comments from the public? And if you do so, please state your name for the record.
My name's Cynthia Wentworth, and I'm a co-director of the Commuter Rail Committee, Passenger Rail Committee. And I'm not real familiar with all this stuff here. However, I've been advised by people to comment on table 2.1 in the row titled Regional Connections. That the score is based on impact on roads, and if it remains this way, there's no way for Alaska Railroad to compete for MTP projects if this criteria remains as it is. It should be modified to at least include the word multimodal.
She said table, you guys want?
Table 2-1 regional connection.
That's in one
Oh,
page.
was I too far ahead?
Yeah, I haven't gotten that one yet.
Oh, am I coming in at the wrong time?
That's the next.
Yeah, that's the next item.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I'll be quiet then. I'll just wait.
I know it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yes.
Hi, this is Cheryl Richardson, and I appreciate the quantity here. I am confused about what the documents, how they relate back to the entire process. And I appreciate Cindy's efforts to have us clarify. It's not just memo 1A. How does this fit into the process of creating the MTP? And I'm trying to scramble, trying to separate them out and understand the order in which they come and how they flow from, I can see the consistency findings. But I am confused, and I would appreciate an overview of what we're doing here, what they've gone through to get to this place, and then what's next.
Through the chair, thank you.
I'm not talking 10 minutes, I'm talking 2 minutes.
Right. Thank you for your question. So as I said, the scope of work, we asked the contractor to look at the existing 2035 and interim 2035 MTP goals with the national planning factors and the national goals that we are required to address and identify any gaps in our objectives and in our goals. We also asked them to go back to the comprehensive plans for the Anchorage Bowl and for Chugach Eagle River to see how well we correlated with those with the goals and objectives. And the reason why that's important is because in our comprehensive plans, that's where we had a huge public involvement to get to those comprehensive plans. And that's where, in fact, we're federally required to look at local land use plans to get our direction from that. That's why it's important that we make sure that we're on track with our goals and objectives. So the client did that. I mean, not really client, the contractor did that. Table 2-1 is a comparison of the federal transportation goals and factors with the MTP goals. So this is it's an exhaustive thing that they did, and it's exhausting to read it.
I have,
Yeah, but if it hadn't been here, you would have questioned how they did it and how they came up with what they did. So there's like a side-by-side comparison of the national goals with the 2035 goals. So then table 2-2 is the national goals and planning factors, findings and recommendations. Those basically said, we needed a new planning factor for enhancing travel and tourism. This is what I just went through, what the new objectives covered. The new objectives that I just highlighted were specifically recommended to address the gaps in our current goals and objectives that address these planning factors. Security. We have a new goal for preserve the existing system for infrastructure condition. There's a new goal that specifically calls out for accessibility. So if you want to find out what the planning goals and factors are, go to page 2. If you look on page 2 of this document, the 1A, it spells it out for you. National goals and planning factors. Safety, infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement and economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and reduced project delivery delays. We did not make these up. We are required to make sure that our plans address the planning factors. And with map 21, there were new planning factors were added, 8 more.
Vivian, you know what, let me jump in real quick. The big picture, getting ready to do MTP, and in order to do a metropolitan transportation for this time around, they're gonna throw out a call for nominations. So we get all these new projects, they can plan out for the next 20 years, but in order to look at those projects and determine short-term, mid-term, long-term, what's really gonna help our community, we have to measure them against something which is going to be the goals and objectives. And you can't use new projects to goals and objectives, and they make sure those goals and objectives meet the federal requirements since we're using federal money. So they're going through this exercise right now to refresh all that, the latest planning thing. And then once we get through all this technical work, we're gonna release a call for public, for new project nominations with criteria, and forms, so people can then start nominating or making suggestions to projects that help with congestion issues, meter issues, all that kind of stuff. So it comes down to preparing for a big influx of project nominations. We have to get all of our ducks in a
I
row.
appreciate understanding the level at which this work is being done. It's preparing for the nominations coming.
Yeah,
That helps.
it's for what the public wants to know, they want to know what projects are going to be built, and this is the background to get it.
And I will say, I'm having a hard time finding the memos you're talking about in this pile. So I would, maybe some larger fonts or something, if we're referring to memo blankety blank, make sure it's up there in big font and bold, so that people like me can find it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I thought the question was, through the chair, I thought the question was to step through each of the tables and explain what the tables were.
Yeah, I couldn't find the tables actually when you were discussing them, so I was kind of scrambled. But thank you, thanks.
Yeah, the packet that was put together, there's a couple different packets, because there's an addendum packet and then there's the primary packet with the memo. But in front with the memo, there was a table that showed all the comments that came in that ended up
I
resulting
found
in
the comment
changes.
table.
And then when you just see it, I mean, the front of this document, it does say it's Tech 1A, and then it's flipping through all of the tables in there. Those are all the ones we were referencing was within this primary document.
That's where we're at right now, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you so much. That helps actually, just to hold it up, then I have more sense.
Are there any other questions or comments from the public at this time? Hearing none, matter lies with me.
Let's approve text memo number 1A with the amendments identified in the addendum.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Kyle, seconded by Mr. Rudolph. Is there any opposed to the motion?
I am.
We'll vote then.
Joy is gone.
Yeah, Barb seconded, sorry, Ms. Halloran. All right. So we will go to vote. Mr. Rudolph?
Yes.
I need to clear it though. Thank you. Mr. Young? Yes. Mr. Redhope?
Yes.
Ms. Haas? Yes. Ms. Beckman? Yes. And I'm also a yes. That is 6 yeses to 1 no. That is approved. All right, so the next item before us is item 5B, which is tech. This is the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Tech Memo 1B. This is a much smaller memo. The second packet, there was a memo that kind of showed with the first thing, and it's the smaller tech memo 1B. And there is also comments, response summary sheet that kind of that as well.
Through the chair. We have an addendum.
Oh, there is an addendum, sorry. There's also an addendum, sorry. I didn't, it got through that time, so I didn't see it.
Again, I
How
apologize.
does the addendum look like? Got the first one.
The addendum is.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the reason why we have addendum to both of these memos was because we had a work session with the technical advisory committee, and we incorporated the changes that they requested at that time. So this is like brand spanking new off the press. So this is the criteria, and as I was saying before, You want your goals and objectives to align with your performance measures, to align with your criteria, right? So we want to make sure that the criteria relate back to the goals and objectives. But the original Tech Memo 1B did not do that. So in our addendum, we are providing a table that does just that. It's this table here, and it shows how the recommended criteria, revised recommended criteria, relate back to the goals and objectives. So there's traceability.
This is the criteria to review projects. So
This
add
is the
that.
screening criteria.
This is initial screening criteria.
For nominated projects.
Yes, we will be having a call for nominations for projects. We will be going out to the public. And what we're asking the committee today to do is to actually approve the criteria in new revised table 2-1. The reason why it's new and revised is because it incorporates recommendations from the TAC 2 days ago. And we will use these criteria, these initial screening criteria, to build the call for nominations form. So you can be assured that the criteria that we are going to, that looks like this new one is a single sheet. This table tells you that these criteria do indeed relate back to the goals and objectives. So we want to also delete one of the recommendations is to delete the fatal flaw screening that's in there. Actually wasn't working very well when we tested the criteria for this initial screening, the test exercise that we did for some projects.
And this is based on your comment, recommendation is edits to this document right here. Is what she's talking about.
Yeah, the primary document.
It's the primary document. Page 4. Is the picture, is the beginning. So that's the recommendation. It came from the pump. I'm not sure who it came from,
Well, but our contractor recommended, there's a screening process with a graphic that starts on page 4 of the primary document. And it's the one that has this cover. We're going to delete the fatal flaw screening that was recommended initially, because it seemed a little too subjective for us. So we deleted that, and we're going to jump straight to the initial screening criteria for projects. And we're asking for approval to release these criteria today. They're in new table 2-2. Yeah, new table 2-2, which is this one. For public review and comment of our criteria for a 15-day period for comment, public review and comment. Then we'll come back to you in June and ask you please approve the rest of the revised technical memorandum. That includes later screening or actually prioritizing for between short-term and long-term. We're also getting rid of the transit criteria because actually, as it turns out, we don't do that. We really take what public transportation gives us, and we don't want to set up the expectation on the part of the public that we plan. AMATS does not plan for public transportation in the larger sense. We can find some finite, discrete projects, but we don't do the public transportation department is largely responsible for planning public transportation.
So just so I'm clear, you're asking that we approve memo 1D with the addendum and then release the screening criteria for review, or just release it?
Just release the new revised table 2-2 for public review and comment of these criteria. Then we will build the call for nominations form using the criteria. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you with the comments we received from the public, and then we'll come back and you can have another chance to look at it and approve the rest of the memo.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
want our comments now, or do you want me to write them for public comment? I don't understand.
I got the old one, now I got another new one, and they're different again. And I don't understand some of the changes, but.
That's a good question. Through the chair, I'm sorry. So we, at the work session, 2 days ago, we had different criteria that were published in this primary document with the cover with the bar graph on it, this document. And we condensed the criteria for connectivity. They were broken out by modes. We collapsed those and put them together, but we didn't feel that they were particularly representative of all the different modes. So we wanted to break out, we included a new one for bicycle and trail use, for transit access and sidewalk use. We felt that that was broader and more encompassing.
If you don't have one for freight, airports, or anything like that.
That falls largely under economic benefits.
Well, they're all gonna have economic benefits one way or the other.
These screening criteria are meant to be a little more general than the specific goals and objectives, or even than like the TIP ranking criteria. And these are meant to help guide the average person to, when you're thinking of a project to nominate, to be able to fill out a form that address these criteria that do relate to the goals and objectives.
So, I mean, if you want to get into any of the comments, I mean, but this is being open for public comment and will be coming back to us.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
So
I'd say
rather
probably-
than jump up and down the screen now, I'll wait.
Okay.
I've done enough of that.
All right.
And I'm out of coffee.
Joy is definitely.
Any other questions or comments from the committee before I open it for public comment? Oh, sorry, he did. Please recognize that Mr. Hart did join us. I'm sorry, I didn't see what time.
That's okay.
Did you just get here?
Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been here, Hal? And Mr. Hansen did have to, he came over and excused himself. I'm sorry, I should have documented that as well. He had an emergency. So, thank you. Where was I? Public comment, sorry. Lose train of thought. All right, I will now open this item. Item 1, Tech Memo 1B for public comment.
Okay, so this is where I...
Yes.
Yeah, again, my name is Cynthia Wentworth, and I'm representing the Passenger Rail for Commuters Committee. I'm the co-director of it. And in Table 2.1, in the row titled Regional Connections, which scores proposed projects based on their impact on roads, there's no way for the Alaska Railroad to compete for MPP projects if this criteria remains as it is. It should be modified to at least include the word multimodal. So that's my first comment, and then go on to Table 2.2, uses vehicle miles traveled as the metric by which alternatives are evaluated. This will result in road projects moving to the front of the line. This should be modified to say person miles traveled instead. This would allow the railroad to be treated as an equal to the road.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, can you please say that last reference again?
The second one,
Yes.
Table 2.2, uses vehicle miles traveled as the metric by which alternatives are evaluated. This will result in road projects moving to the front of the line. This should be modified to say person miles traveled instead. This would allow the railroad to be treated as an equal to the road. I'm talking about page 7 in this.
It's in the original document. The original 2-2, proposed alternative screening criteria, vehicle miles traveled.
On page 7, we do have person trips in that section.
Yeah, I keep person trips in here, so yeah, and I suppose it depends on whether a railroad is considered a vehicle too, I don't know.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
Thank you for explaining it was done. I think I'm getting a handle on it. What I understand is that now we are looking at the potential criteria for assessing project nominations as they come through this process.
Yes.
And they result from the federal performance standards, from previous and gap resolution between 2035 and 2040 plans. And also they reflect goals from the comprehensive plans at Chudiak and at Anchorage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, the matter lies in committee.
I move to release tech memo 1B and the screening tables as amended in the addendum for public comment.
I think we're just doing table 2-2 for public comment.
Oh, it's all of it, I thought.
I thought we were doing all of it.
No, review this
Just-
information in tech memo 1B. So
Just table 2-2, or
Okay.
the new 2-2.
Please amend my motion to the screening tables and as are amended in the addendum. Oh, whatever. Okay, good enough?
So it'd basically be this.
It's this.
No,
It's just this.
It's what was this? It's this what was in the
One
agenda.
with yellow one?
Yeah. It's releasing that. Public comment.
So, just, you had some good comments.
Okay.
So the rest of one, memo 1B on the other tables that I'll point out, will they go out later? Or will the comments that you just made, are they going to be received?
Those will be considered part of the public comment.
Or 2.2? 2.2? We're getting ready to release 2.2.
The public can comment on that when it's posted for the technical advisory committee meeting. Next time we'll be ready to you to approve the rest of the memo.
Yeah, now that we've heard it as public comment, we can go ahead and look at it and try and incorporate it in, because you're not approving the rest of Tech Memo 1B until June.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure you're there.
I got comments.
So it will be added to this table next time around.
So, let's see. So this is the same for 2.1 and 2.2? They're both,
All your comments.
all my comments, well, you're just taking under consideration and then,
Well, we're not approving those tables yet.
Yeah.
I see. So when will the next chance, will I need to say this again at some point?
I mean, I just got the comments, so
Okay.
we'll incorporate them into the comment record.
Yeah, to see whether or not they have been incorporated and whether your comments were addressed, if you want to iterate them, if they have not been,
Yeah.
you will likely have an opportunity at next month's meeting, because that's when this is going to be coming back to us for.
So is that, it's like that on June 8th?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be out of town that day.
But it'll be posted the week before,
A week
and so you'll
before.
be able to submit written comments within that week.
And
You'll
so
see
this will be posted?
You'll see your comment on this sheet, and then you'll see the staff's response to your comment on whether or not they recommended it to be incorporated. And then the TAC will vote whether or not they agree with the staff's recommendation here.
Will that be online then?
Yeah.
They will
Yes.
be on each year, and we'll also, we've been trying to make it simpler for everybody to provide comments online through, I mean, it fills the table as we go. So the only thing is you have to make a comment for everyone who comments.
But
You
yes,
can also email, you can also amatsinfo.org.
but our agendas with all of the documents are posted a week in advance of this meeting, so you would have the opportunity to look at them, and if you had any continuing concerns, you could submit, if you weren't able to attend.
And first, you should be able to see this and then start putting in comments.
A week before next meeting.
So you should see how your comments were addressed.
And through the chair, may I just add, our first public meeting is going to be June 14th here in Anchorage. We're going to have our contractor here, and part of that is to meet with the community and see what your issues and your problems are, and maybe even possible solutions. And that's when we're going to start the call for nominations, where it's going to be for 30 days. 30-day call for nomination project. And there's also thank you. And June 14th. June 15th, we'll have a public meeting at Eagle River with our contractor as well. And then we'll be having listening sessions throughout, to try to reach out to folks at Bear Paw Festival and other things that are happening around town. So we're just getting started with this project. But the website is up and we're getting going.
Thank you, Vivian. Do we have a motion? You second it. All right, Mr. Van Hoff has seconded. Are there any opposed to releasing table 2.2 for 15 days public comment?
Can I sneak in a question? I'm sorry. Could someone explain the difference between these two documents?
So the primary document, the one right there that should say 1B on the cover, that's the actual, that is the tech memo itself. The table will be within that document.
No, it's separate. Excuse me, it's separate because we amended it. So it's a standard.
No, I said it will be. It will
It
be
is up.
within that tech memo when the
Yeah.
tech memo is finalized.
Oh, when it's finalized,
Yes.
absolutely.
So that we're working on that table to be incorporated into the
And
tech
this
memo.
tech memo may have to reflect changes done in the color document?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thank you, everybody. We're now on to our final action item 5C, the Citizens Advisory Committee appointments. Debbie Osander, Jonathan Lang, and Miranda Walso. Did I say that right?
That is all correct. So these three people are currently serving the committee. They have come through before, we recommended approval, and they went to the policy committee and got approved. So these, because we staggered the seats, so we didn't have everyone being done at the same time. These people are into their second term, so they've all been contacted and they're all willing to serve a second term. So we're asking you to recommend to the policy committee that they be approved for reappointment.
How long are the terms?
Well, no, some of them started and they had a one-year term,
Okay.
some were two, so we didn't have.
Everybody
show
ending
up
at the same time.
We had
and
a point
everything.
11, he reappointed 11.
I was feeling really old for a moment. Sorry. It doesn't seem like it was that long
Well, yeah,
ago.
and you probably will recognize that Miranda also was appointed about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
But she was
Exactly.
filling someone's seat,
Okay.
so.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public on this item? Hearing none, the matter will ask the committee.
The approval of these three people for the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Howe, seconded by Mr. Lindemann. Are there any opposed to the recommendation for approval? Hearing none. We are recommending that. Okay. And we had already done item 6A, so we're on to item 6B, the first quarter obligation report.
And since this is based on the first quarter,
It looks like this for anybody in the audience, just so you know.
based on the first quarter, we have very little that's been obligated in terms of the number of projects, but we obligated the O'Malley Road reconstruction and pavement replacement, so there's the vast majority of the roadway program. So really nothing to report on that. Everything, this is another one of those items that we were going to report on last month. So normally we would have reported that. Everything is tracking as well. If you look at the last page of printing, which is the third page, you can see that we're supposed to be within plus or minus 15% of what we had anticipated, and we're at 0.01%. So we're right. We've only obligated with so many projects. That's a big chunk of money there. So okay, answer questions. A lot of projects in the non-motorized and CMAC that are visualized for you.
Questions or comments? Are there any questions or comments from the public?
This is, may or may not be a part of this table. I'm wondering where the discussion is happening over the dollars that were released back to the state coffers from the Kabata project. I understand it's about 28 million must be spent within 50 miles of the project. And I'm just wondering, where is that discussion taking place?
My understanding is that discussion is taking place on the 8th floor and in the governor's office. Has nothing to do with us. It's not, these are not AMATS funds. So when the state makes that decision, they'll let us know. And if it's something that will be inside the AMATS area, we'll include it in the tip. Unless you have something else to add.
State of Alaska Department of Transportation was asked to compile a list of projects for headquarters, DOT, Central Region has compiled that list and submitted it down to headquarters, and they were going to pass that list up through the commissioner onto the governor for selection of projects, and we're still waiting to hear.
See, that's even better.
So committee comments, the only, well, I have a committee comment. I just wanted to remind everybody that next Wednesday, May 17th, is Bike to Work Day. So hopefully this beautiful weather continues. Seems like it will be. There might be some drizzle, but it's a wonderful opportunity to get out and ride the trails, ride a lot of the new bike lanes. I know I live out in West Park, and now we have pretty much continuous bike lanes down a lot of Raspberry Road to get to Dowling all the way, and it's almost a continuous corridor coming down Dowling, Elmore to get here. I could actually use it rather than trying to use the trail system to go through and see the woods by myself. So, it's kind of nice. We have a meeting at City Hall with the mayor. Maybe I'll bring a couple changes of clothes. I wanted to encourage everybody to participate in Bike to Work Day. There's a lot of great, always the ever popular bacon station. I think I got a notification today about a breakfast burrito station. Yeah, I was gonna say I saw a notification about breakfast burrito, and that one piqued my interest.
I would be interested in, yeah. So, Ann, do you know, are we missing locations that need counters, you know?
I think we're only lacking one, and there was a mail sent to someone, I believe, will take them up on it, so I think we're good for counters.
Great. Awesome.
And do you have, Ann Slavy is the health department, she's organizing that, I guess. Do you have any other tidbits you'd like to add about Bike to Work Day?
I don't believe so. The one thing I would like to mention is that the League of American Bicyclists has again awarded Anchorage a bicycle-friendly community at the silver level, so that will go until 2021. So that was embargoed until today. But it would have been nice, of course, to move up to gold, but I believe that was good, and they had, kudos for our efforts that we did have.
Awesome. And related to that, yesterday was Bike to School Day. I saw a lot of youth out bicycling. I had a lot of friends that bike with their kids, and they were actually surprised at how fast they got to their school. And I said, you could do that more often than just Bike to School Day. Help solve some of my problems on the adjacent roadways. It's encouraging. So, are there any other committee comments?
Related to that, we're implementing one of Ann's ideas. We're going to have a bus down by Westchester, and we're going to rope off some of the blind spots so that bikers and bus operators are both familiar with where some of the difficult spots are when you're navigating around a bus on a bicycle. So we'll have a big area down there.
Kind of educational opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome.
No bacon.
Not too late.
I know, exactly. It's not too late. You have time.
So we do have cool reflectors that you can slap on your pant leg and
Take pictures.
oh yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the best. I love the figures that they show where in the blind spots of large equipment, construction equipment, you know,
Mhm.
large commercial vehicles, everything else, I don't think people realize how many blind spots those vehicles have.
Right.
And I love seeing it just to remind myself to be a better driver, really. I mean, and be aware of those things, so that's cool, take pictures.
Any other committee comments?
I have one. I put on everyone's lap there, this is our public involvement plan that we worked on for so long. So that's printed now. I have some more copies here for anyone in the public who wants them. And I have a box or so back at my office if I don't have enough, but
So they're just gonna replace my old one?
they can.
Great.
There it is. in all its glory.
Any others? Now, are there any public?
Christopher Salerno, Muni Air Quality. I just wanted to let everybody know Ann is retiring at the end of May, so this will be her last flight to work. And all of her services over 23 years with the municipality, air quality and CMAQ projects. Just wanted to put that out there to your committee and let you guys know that she's been doing the bike work for, what, 12, 13 years now. Yes. So thank you very much to Ann over the years.
Yes, and thank you. Congratulations. Hope you're moving on to bigger, better things, even if that means golf. Are there any other public comments at this time?
It's Mother's Day Sunday.
Yes.
Hope nobody forgot. Somebody did. So thankfully for Rush Delivery. I know, that's why I'm like thankful for Rush Delivery.
My mom's birthday was on Tuesday, and it always falls very close to Mother's Day, sometimes on Mother's Day, so I can't ever forget.